Welcome back, everybody, to CBS News 24/7. So we begin this hour with our monitors in Delaware. President Joe Biden casting his ballot for the 2024 presidential election there just moments ago. Afterwards, a reporter asked him if he was seeing the moment as bittersweet. To that, the president responded, just sweet. But both campaigns now in full swing as candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump make their final arguments to voters. They know this, and so do we. They have 8 days to make their closing arguments to try to capture those crucial undecided voters. So to do that, Harris is wheels up to the state of Michigan. Trump is going down to Georgia. He's dealing with a lot of things today, not the least of which the fallout of his rally in New York over the weekend. What happened? Well, if you didn't hear it yet, here it is. Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe said this about Puerto Rico.
There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there.
So the Latino vote, crucial for any campaign wanting to win the White House. Kamala Harris addressed those comments while departing from Michigan. Here's what we caught her saying.
I think last night Donald Trump's event in Madison Square Garden really highlighted a point that I've been making throughout this campaign. He is focused and actually fixated on his grievances, on himself, and on dividing our country. And it is not in any way something that will strengthen the American family, the American worker. It is nothing about what he is saying that is actually going to support the aspirations, the dreams, and the ambitions of the American people. It is absolutely something that is intended to and is fanning the fuel of trying to divide our country.
So you see them here, our campaign reporters following these campaigns right to the end. Aaron Navarro is with Team Harris. But first, CBS News' Jared Eggleston is at Atlanta with the Trump campaign. Jared, what's the damage there on the ground to the Trump campaign as they react to this today?
Reed, good afternoon to you. You know, the Trump campaign advisor told CBS News that they are frustrated at those comments that were made prior to the former president taking stage in Madison Square Garden last night. Now, this rally, as you saw there, was a big one. It was intended for it to be the closing remarks of the former president's campaign. As you said in that intro there, Reed, we just have about 8 days left until Election Day. And right now, these campaigns know that those undecided voters are so crucial, and so they were hoping that, you know, the focus would be on things like the economy, immigration, areas where Trump feels most comfortable. But instead today we're talking about these comments that were made prior to the former president going on stage. And we should point out, Reed, that the campaign is distancing themselves from it, telling CBS News that they did not know that comedian was going to say those last night as well.
Right, distancing themselves, but that Latino vote is so crucial for anybody who wants to win the White House. And yet Donald Trump doubling down on talking about mass deportations, also talking about tariffs. What can you tell us about that?
So last night, Reed, we heard the former president talk about things that are key to his campaign. You said those tariffs, those mass deportations. He also announced a new policy last night saying that he would give a tax credit for Americans, for families that are caring for a loved one. So it's very clear in these last days of the campaign, like you said, Reed, that Latino vote is so popular. These campaigns are trying to reach for just any of these undecided voters that are still out there, which we know from polling that it is very small at this point.
Yeah, let's talk about those very thin margins. He's set to give remarks today later in Atlanta. The former president lost that state back in 2020. Coming off that controversial event over the weekend, can we expect anything different, any change from Donald Trump?
I think today we would expect Donald Trump to be really focusing on those issues that I mentioned, the economy, immigration. Those are issues that we found matter most to Georgians, or to voters here in Georgia, but not only here in Georgia, but across battleground states. So expect the former president to lean into issues like that. We are outside of where that rally will be taking place later on tonight. Right now, we are in Midtown Atlanta, an area here in Georgia that really is a stronghold for the Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris, but the former president making several trips, and the campaign itself making several trips here to Georgia over the last few days and even weeks, showing that they understand just how crucial it is to win that vote here. Because, Reed, as you pointed out, the former president only lost the state of Georgia by some 11,000 votes last year, so it is going to be incredibly tight on election night.
Jared, thank you so much for that report. So CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro, as promised, brings us the Harris campaign. Aaron, just moments ago, the vice president talked to reporters right there before getting on a plane. Her comments about what President Donald Trump's comedian had to say at that New York rally. She's now moving on to talk to voters in Michigan. What do we expect her to have to say to voters there?
Well, Reed, good to be with you. We expect Harris to focus on union voters and manufacturing in Michigan. She's going to be visiting a facility for semiconductors in Saginaw that benefited from federal funding from the CHIPS Act. All of this happening as she's making her closing message speech in the next 8 days on the economy, trying to cut into the lead that Trump has in polling. And our latest CBS News polling shows that Trump has maintained his edge on the economy. Part of Harris's visit to Michigan today is to try and cut into that.
So Harris hitting 6 states this week as part of her closing arguments to voters. It's a hefty schedule. So where does the campaign trail lead next?
Michigan today, ending with a rally with her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, one of their first events in a while that they're doing together. Singer Maggie Rogers will also be there. Tomorrow in D.C., she's set to give a speech on the ellipse in front of the White House, really leaning into that contrast on democracy in January 6th, but also putting a blunt question to voters. Who do you want to see in that White House behind me, who's focused on you, or Trump, who Harris says is focused on his grievances? And then she will be hitting 3 states on Wednesday: Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, with another big GOTV rally and concert there in that big Democratic bastion of votes in Madison, Wisconsin. And then Nevada and Arizona with other concerts going on accompanying her events on Thursday. And that's all we have for the next 4 days.
All right, well, that's a whole bunch right there on the menu. Another Obama set to campaign for Kamala Harris. Barack Obama hits the stage in Philadelphia alongside Bruce Springsteen, John Legend. What are you watching there?
I'm watching to see how much Barack Obama talks about Harris's policies. In a lot of his speeches, the message he leans on is the contrast between her and Trump when it comes to character. He brings up how Trump handled the COVID-19 pandemic, saying that Trump did not use the playbook that Obama left during his administration for pandemic situations. Will he talk about Harris's economic plan? Will he try and make the case for her going forward, rather than reminding voters of the dangers of former President Trump? It's something that animates the base, but I'm curious to see in these closing days if Obama, a big, prolific Democrat, will lean into Harris's policies.
Aaron Navarro, CBS News campaign reporter, thank you so much for that report from Washington. Always great to talk to you. So as we mentioned, Tim Walz, VP nominee for Kamala Harris's ticket, will join her today for an event in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But before that, Walz stopped in Wisconsin for a campaign event at a manufacturing plant. His remarks focusing on the economy and attacking Donald Trump's desire to outsource to China. Early voting numbers across the country.
He was going to stop the offshoring of jobs. Here's what he did. He cut taxes for corporations during his presidency. Those very places he cut taxes for shipped 200,000 jobs overseas. He awarded $425 billion in federal contracts to companies that were offshoring. So think about what that just means. He took the tax dollars you paid to offshore your jobs to give a tax cut for those very companies that did it. As a result of those trade wars, and let's be very clear, his mismanagement of COVID, by the end of his presidency, he had wiped out more than half of the manufacturing jobs that had been created in the previous decade. He was asleep at the wheel while China seized the advantage, and now he says we should just let China dominate the industries of the future. That's who this guy is. Look, no surprise, Trump's all talk when it comes to being tough on China. We found out that his Trump-branded Bibles were printed there. I said this, he outsourced God to the Chinese. And then my favorite was this, though, as I said, I was going to try and show him a little bit of grace. You know, I don't really blame him, because the Made in China sticker was inside the Bible, a place he'd never seen. So that was, you know who he is. Well, Look, from praising Xi Jinping, he loves him. He rules his people with an iron fist. That's what Donald Trump said. Praising a Chinese dictator. Why he outsources to him, outsources your jobs, and then gets in front of people and tries to tell him he's tough on this. The last week, he's been calling our country the garbage can of the world. What an unpatriotic scab to say such a thing. To say such a thing. Look, now he's literally trash-talking us, but the American public needs to be fed up with it. They need to be fed up with it. We talk about the president's bully pulpit, to be able to speak with courage, to inspire the American people. He only knows one way to be a bully, and that's what he thinks strength is, pushing down on people who are less than him. It's time for the American people to stand up to the bully, put him in his place, and be done with Donald Trump.
Tough words from Tim Walz there, and you know who he's talking to? Early voters. So we're tracking early voting numbers across the country. They're starting to roll in now. 42.7 million Americans have already done what you're seeing these Americans do here, waiting in line to cast that early ballot. More than 21 million people went to the polls in person, and 21 million sent their ballots in by mail. We want to let you know you can watch Election Night with the CBS News team live from New York and with our team spread out all across the country, especially in those battleground states. We have real-time results, analysis, and exclusive polling. Coverage starts at 4 p.m. Eastern, and CBS News 24/7 has you covered 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Think about this. 10,000 North Korean soldiers on their way to Russia. We've got an update from the Pentagon on how those troops could be used and why the Pentagon says they're in position. Stay with us. Welcome back. So the Pentagon says North Korea sent about 10,000 troops to aid Russia in its war against Ukraine. NATO says some troops already deployed to Russia's Kursk region, which is an area where Russia really struggles to push back against Ukrainian troops. NATO Secretary General stresses North Korea's involvement in the conflict as a significant move and a dangerous expansion in this war. So let's talk about that, drill down. Let's go live to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett. Charlie, this is an escalation, but the question I have, is it going to be effective for Russia?
Yeah, Reed, the question people are asking here is similar to that. What are they doing there? So, first of all, I have to address the numbers. You know, last week we spoke about it. There are 1,500 North Korean troops in Russia. South Koreans were raising that alarm. Then it doubled to 3,000. Now we get confirmation from the Pentagon just this morning, 10,000 North Korean troops. As you said, NATO said they're pushing toward that Kursk region. Pentagon isn't going that far. In terms of numbers, when you consider that there are more than 500,000 Russian soldiers deployed across this front line, it's really just a drop in the ocean. However, what does it mean? Are these North Korean commando units? Are they going to be engaging in combat? Are they infantry divisions? Are they any good at fighting, as one official put it here? You know, they haven't fought a war for 70 years, so you don't have the most experienced soldiers on the front line. But where it's concerning, aside from that unholy alliance between Russia and North Korea, which of course has got everybody concerned for all kinds of reasons, is whether this is just the beginning of what may be more to come, because North Korea has one of the largest standing armies in the world, 1.4 million soldiers. So really we're looking at it now and thinking, what does this mean? Maybe not so much in the short term, but what does it mean potentially?
Well, North Korea and Russia, two countries on everybody's watch list. What does the response look like from the rest of the world?
So that's the reason it's so concerning, not necessarily 10,000 North Korean commandos, which is how they've been described, but what this relationship means. Okay, so it's very important to point out here, 5 months ago, Russia and North Korea signed a pact, a mutual defense pact, and now this is being enacted. I mean, it was just ratified just a few days ago. So this is important. Then you have to ask yourself, what are the North Koreans getting out of it? And the big concern, and it's something that President Putin has not really gone down that avenue, are they going to be sharing, ballistic missile technology, get their weapons working better, longer distance? And of course, the big question over nuclear technology. And that destabilizes the entire region. Then you've got Russia, China, North Korea, South Korea, that entire Indo-Pacific region would be under threat if you have a nuclear-armed North Korea. That is what's really raising the alarm bells, not necessarily 10,000 North Korean troops, but the closeness of the relationship between North Korea and Russia.
Yeah, what does it mean? Charlie Daggett, thank you so much. No doubt we know you'll be watching this in the days, weeks, and months ahead. We appreciate you. So video to our monitors shows a large wildfire in Russia near an ethanol plant. Reports say that Ukrainian drones sparked the fire while targeting that plant. Well, one person is injured as we see the flames against the night sky. Ukraine says that those drone attacks across enemy lines target infrastructure crucial to Russia's war efforts. And they say they are a direct response to Moscow strikes on Ukraine. Preliminary talks for hostage and ceasefire negotiations in Gaza ramp up again on Monday as Israel carried out its first open attack on Iran over the weekend. CBS News foreign correspondent Remy Inocencio reports on Iran's response today.
Israel and Iran now appear to be posturing, but holding back for now on any more military action. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says that his government will respond to Saturday's airstrikes with wisdom. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the IDF's attacks early Saturday had achieved their goals. And the IDF had described them as targeted and precise, and that they hit Iranian surface-to-air missile systems and missile production sites. Yesterday, Netanyahu addressed victims of the October 7th attacks and said that whoever hurts us, we hurt him. And that was a reference to the fact that these strikes over the weekend were a response to Iran attacking Israel back on October 1st. That was with nearly 200 ballistic missiles. So far, Iran's response has been muted. Iran's supreme leader called Israel's attack a miscalculation. If Iran does not strike back, this could very well be the end of this round of back and forth fighting. But a national security expert on Iran, who we spoke to here, said that truly avoiding a bigger regional war rests on ending Israel's operations against both Hezbollah in Lebanon and its conflict, of course, with Hamas in Gaza. The enclave's health ministry said that IDF strikes killed more than 80 people over the weekend and more than 800 people in the past 3 weeks in the north. And that is where Israeli troops raided one of the last functioning hospitals and struck a school turned shelter for the second time in a week. Now, the IDF maintains that Hamas uses civilian infrastructure to hide both weapons and fighters. But now, efforts to work towards a ceasefire deal are finally happening again. CIA Director Bill Burns is in Doha now trying to restart those talks. Egypt has proposed a 2-day ceasefire and the release of 4 Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners.
Remy Inocencio there. Hey, live look at Albuquerque, New Mexico, coming home to the United States now. The big weather headline today is the heat, but Jess, we're hearing it's not going to last very long.
As we take a look at the next 6 to 10 days, we are still expected to see well above normal conditions down in the south. So let's dive into this, because right now we're breaking records in cities like Albuquerque this afternoon, sitting in the 80s today, 90s near Phoenix, upper 80s in the forecast anywhere from Oklahoma City over into Dallas. Now, as we take a look at the daytime highs, when it comes to departure from normal, we're about 22 degrees above average in cities like Kansas City throughout this afternoon. And we continue to see well above average conditions down into cities like El Paso at 18 degrees above average. Now, this heat is here to stay for a little bit longer, especially as we head into our Halloween forecast. Millions of Americans are going to be dealing with what feels like summer-like conditions heading into this week's forecast. Taking a look behind me, that area of high pressure continues to sit over the south. This is what brought record-breaking numbers all the way up into New York last week to kick off the week, and it's now centralized over the south, continuing to impact many cities with record-breaking numbers throughout this afternoon, like Little Rock, Wichita, Tulsa, and Memphis. Now, looking at the next 6 to 10 days issued by the Climate Prediction Center, we'll continue to watch above normal conditions stick around in states like Mississippi and Alabama. We are getting a nice little break, though, over into the west coast, where we are expected to see snow in the forecast into the evening hours tonight, all the way over into the Rockies, with cooler conditions off in that region.
All right, thanks, Jess. When we come back on CBS News 24/7, streaming coast to coast and worldwide, a manhunt in Tennessee, a murder suspect on the run. Stay with us. Now to Indiana, where a jury this morning looks at new evidence in the murders of 2 teenage girls. Over the coming days, jurors will likely learn more about the suspect, Richard Allen, and his more than 60 alleged confessions to murders. Last week, the jury heard from family members, witnesses, experts, and police officers. People in the courtroom also saw photos of the crime scene and the bodies of those 2 teens just dumped along an Indiana trail. These are called the Delphi murders. They happened back in 2017. The case went cold until 2022 when prosecutors pinned Allen as a suspect. Murder out of Tennessee now prompting a nationwide manhunt. We're talking about Nicholas Wayne Hamlet, wanted for first-degree murder. This started last week when a hiker called 911 pretending he fell off a cliff. Well, police got there to the scene. They found a man dead. On that man, a stolen ID. Well, police say Hamlet called 911 under a fake name and then took off. Boeing's worker strike pinching that transportation giant. The company plans to raise more than $15 billion in capital through investors as early as today. According to people familiar with the matter, most of that money is expected to come from stock sales. The aerospace company halts in production, causing many problems for Boeing. Let's jump the map to North Carolina. Students in Asheville head back to the classroom today after Hurricane Helene just did a lot of damage and shut down schools for weeks. The city of Asheville now says schools, for now at least, will be open, but shorter than usual days. Also, they're canceling after-school activities for now. We also understand that CBS News' Rob Marciano is on the ground talking to people who are trying to rebound, also speaking with students, parents, and educators about the huge challenges they face to reclaim some semblance of normalcy in North Carolina.
It's gonna be the best day.
In the hills of Watauga County, North Carolina, the ride to Valley Crucis Elementary is filled with excitement. Students here are finally back to school. It was a month ago that floodwaters from Hurricane Helene swept through western North Carolina, carving a path of destruction, filling Valley Crucis Elementary with 4 feet of muddy water and swamping the school buses parked outside. Now, classes are being held in an old conference center, a temporary space, about a mile from the damaged school. Leslie Alexander is the superintendent.
You know, getting kids back in the building is a first step to normalcy, but we have to realize that people have been through a lot.
When Helene hit, over 450 schools were impacted across 28 school districts. Schools in 5 of those districts remain closed. Some may not open until early November. Many students are still carrying a heavy mental load, the pain of losing a loved one or their home or both.
I want you to look to somebody near you.
Today, extra counselors are on hand, available for any students or staff who want to talk.
I started feeling anxiety from not seeing anyone. So it was really refreshing when I heard that this week we were going back to school.
12-year-old Georgia was with her parents James and Heather when their home began to flood, and parts of their community were washed away.
When the rain stopped and we went and walked around, she said, I'm not learning academically right now, but I'm learning a lot about survival.
You get emotional when you talk about lessons of survival. Why is that?
The water may be gone, but the resilience remains. Rob Marciano, CBS News, Valley Crucis, North Carolina.
Rob, thank you. CBS News polling reveals one candidate ahead in the popular vote, but the Electoral College and those battleground state polls show something else altogether. More with our CBS News polling experts when CBS News 24/7 comes back. Countdown to Election Day, and the candidates making their closing arguments. So this is the last full week of campaign events before Americans voice their choice. Candidate Kamala Harris is in Michigan. Donald Trump is on the stump in Georgia. And that, people, is strategy. Battleground states will decide this election, according to many people. In fact, let's look at some polling. CBS News polling shows the presidential race is as close as it's ever been. Candidates virtually tied in those states. So how do you make sense of the polls? CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. He joins us now to talk about some of the key takeaways. All right, so what are the takeaways there from where you stand in your expert vantage point, my friend?
Hey there, Reed. Yeah, we'll make it make sense. Look, how many ways can you say close, tight, even, right?
Right.
Essentially even. And that is where this is. It's really as simple as that. Look, the national number here at +1 Harris, that's effectively even. That is, as you said, as tight as it's been. The battlegrounds, remember, this is everyone's vote counts and everyone's opinion counts in the nation, but there are 7 battleground states that will swing the Electoral College. That decides the presidency. So you look across them as a composite, that is even. In fact, if you look at each one of those states, our CBS estimates has each of them effectively even. So that's where it is, but it's the why that really drives this read. Let me show you this, which we've been focusing on, and it's the gender gap. It's going to be one of the bigger stories this year because you see women breaking for Kamala Harris, you see men breaking for Donald Trump. A couple of reasons behind that. One is you see a lot of women who feel like the push for gender equality in the U.S. hasn't gone far enough. They're voting for Harris. You see a lot of men who say they feel like those efforts have gone too far. They're breaking for Trump. It's not just specific issues. It's some of those larger views about these larger changes in society that are underpinning a lot of this, Reed.
Fascinating to see. How much should we on election night be looking at county by county? Because coming up, we're going to be talking about specific efforts in specific counties. How crucial are the counties when we all start to watch those election results come in?
On election night, what the data desk does is look for patterns, which is what do you see consistently across precincts and across counties? I always tell people, don't get too hung up on any one particular county. Sometimes a county is important to a candidate because the candidate has to run up big margins there, right? It's a big difference if they win it by, in the case of, let's say, a city like Philadelphia, where Kamala Harris has been campaigning. You know, if she wins that, she's going to win it, but how many votes can she rack up there is key. And there are going to be others, let's say, across a big stretch of more rural counties. Republicans often do well. Donald Trump will need to do well. But the question will be how well in small county after small county. So that's one of the ways that you look at that on election night, Reed.
Fascinating to see, and we're glad you are there watching the polls. Yes, if we had a thesaurus, we could go through and try to see what words we haven't used for tight, for margins of error that are just razor thin. Thank you so much. We'll continue looking for new words to use. I think we're running out of words. So let's talk about something that could drive headlines election night and in the weeks after Election Day, and that is this: a looming election certification crisis playing out in battleground states. Writer at large for the New York Times, Jim Ruttenberg, joining us right now on the stream live. You've traveled to 4 different battleground states. Finding the Stop the Steal movement has really evolved to what some officials are saying is a ready to reject the vote movement. And what that means is declining certification election results by any means necessary. I want to ask you a lot of questions, but I read the Times article front to back, and this quote stood out to me. Here it is. I want to get your reaction to this. Cleta Mitchell, called by some the rising star in the Republican election denialism, said, quote, "We are going to retake our election system one county at a time all over America," close quote. What does she mean by that?
Well, thank you for having me. And what that means is that really what happened after January 6th was a movement came together to as Cleta Mitchell put it, the goal was to take over local elections offices for a lot of reasons. But as we near the actual election day, one thing that's going on is that there are people in place on these local election boards that will have the power to potentially interfere with the certification of the vote. That's when it starts on the local level. There's a kind of a stamp of approval that we have the numbers. This is very kind of pro forma in the past. It goes all the way through to January 6th every 4 years, where Congress finalizes it. And everyone knows that part of the process because that's the part of the process that got interrupted 4 years ago. So let's talk about it. In the years since 2020, election officials have voted against certifying results in at least 20 counties across 8 states. So does this have any implication on what we may see in the upcoming election? People, and that's moderate Republicans, Democrats, election administrators, people who are not part of this movement, are preparing for some boards in some key swing states potentially voting against certification. I want to note that while the votes over the past few years against certification were extraordinary. We've never seen anything like this in American history, at least in recorded history. Those votes were normally kind of symbolic. They were overruled by other people on their election boards. The certifications went through. On some key cases, they didn't. And the fear now is that if that happens after this election day, that could stall a state as it has to submit its own full state results, including all counties, to the Electoral College ahead of December 17th this year. That's why I asked our previous reporter about that county by county and how to watch as election results roll in.
You know, it's hard to not leave our viewers who are watching right now in a dark alley. Some of them may feel some hope because of the 2022 Electoral Count Reform Act, which essentially mandates that states have a deadline to certify those results. But there's a fly in the ointment here, according to your reporting, by way of no punishment for those who refuse to certify. Tell us what that could lead to.
Well, I think really the issue is it's unclear after that deadline what happens if you miss it. So you miss that deadline. I want to say this so that no one goes to too dark of a place.
Right.
Every lawyer I talk to, every election expert says people may try. The courts are going to kick in. There are provisions in that law that you mentioned to fast track states, to pressure them to get that certification done on time. But there's just, as you put it, a fly in the ointment that we don't know what happens if a state misses that deadline. The deadline actually this year is December 11th. That gives them a few days before the Electoral College meets. So what most people think is if someone holds out, if a state misses that deadline, they'll still get it together by December 17th. The question is there then, when it gets to Congress, pretext for members of Congress to say, wait a minute, that state missed its deadline. We're not satisfied that all those problems were solved, and we want to look into that. Now you have a different situation.
We know at her recent town hall, candidate Kamala Harris told Oprah Winfrey when she was asked about this very potential problem happening in the country, she said, quote, "We are ready." Jim, it's great to talk to you there. Thank you so much for your deep reporting. It's fascinating, that reporting in the New York Times. Thank you so very much for being with us on CBS News 24/7. Live look now, Denver. The city could see one of its first snowfalls of the season later this week. Jess, I think a lot of people are eyeing their ski clothes in the closet.
I know. Start pulling it out now, because if you live anywhere from Telluride all the way up into Wyoming, we are dealing with snow right around the corner as we head into the next couple days. Here's what it's looking like right now. That system starting to bring in thunderstorm activity for our friends near Utah, all the way over into Colorado and Wyoming. That same exact one is going to bring in plenty of snow for those higher elevation areas. Taking a look behind me, winter weather advisories already are in effect for areas like Utah, all throughout Colorado too, and the Rockies as we head into the next 3 days. So timing this out now on Futurecast, we can expect thunderstorms widespread throughout that region into the overnight hours tonight. And by tomorrow morning, just around 6 a.m., we have snow stretched anywhere from Moab, Utah, all the way over into Durango too. Denver's going to get their fair share of storms as well as we head into our Tuesday and Wednesday forecast that continues to track to the north, producing anywhere from 4 to 12 inches of snow. The higher the elevation, the more likely we'll see those heavier amounts of snow too, stretching all the way down into Telluride. This is a good example. Close to 10 inches expected just within the next 48 hours. Now we continue to keep a close eye on the whole state of Utah and just those western portions of the Rockies as we gear up for scattered thunderstorms associated with the exact same system that's bringing in that snow. But from snow up in the Rockies to record-breaking heat down into New Mexico, we really have it all right now in this fall setup.
Full meal deal.
Really.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
58% of voters consider immigration as a major factor in how they will vote next week. So when we come back, our Eye on America takes us to border towns, one at a time, spanning thousands of miles. Omar Villafranca will have that report. Stay right there. Back in a few. Welcome back, everybody. Fallout falling hard on the ears of the Trump campaign after a comedian at a Trump rally in New York made racist comments about Puerto Rico. Lawmakers all over the country reacting today. Now New York lawmakers weighing in. Here's longtime Puerto Rican Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez speaking just moments ago. Let's listen.
He claims that he loves Puerto Rico. I say, we are brave, hard-working people. We are not draft dodgers. In fact, 325,000 Puerto Rican veterans served or still in the military, serving our nation. In fact, 1,225 have died. New York City is home to the largest Puerto Rican community in the United States. Puerto Ricans have contributed to the culture and history of our great city in countless ways. To come to New York and make these comments is a slap in the face to every Puerto Rican in New York and the 5 million Puerto Ricans in the mainland. The Trump campaign may claim that these comments do not reflect their views, but his track record is clear. Trump repeatedly attacked our island in the wake of Hurricane Maria. You know why? Because he failed miserably. He didn't provide the assistance that American citizens in Puerto Rico deserve. You know why? Because he doesn't care. The only person that he cares is Donald Trump. He claimed Puerto Ricans want everything done for them, derided Puerto Rico as dirty and poor, and suggested selling Puerto Rico or trading it for Greenland. Donald, I have news for you. We are here to stay, and we are here. We are going nowhere, not here or Puerto Rico, and we will hold you accountable on November 5th. Hey, let's go. So, you know, he made a calculated error yesterday. Yes. Basically, he said goodbye to PA, to Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, we have 450,000 Puerto Ricans. That's right. And I am telling all my brothers and sisters in Allentown, in Philadelphia, this is a matter of self-respect. You go out there and cast your vote. What a contrast. Yesterday, our Vice President Kamala Harris released her...
Pain in her voice, but steel in her heels. Nydia Velázquez not only talking to New Yorkers who have roots in Puerto Rico, but also people in battleground states who have roots in Puerto Rico. This story is going to continue throughout the day. Many people adding their voice in a chorus of voices condemning what happened there at that Trump rally, calling those comments and other comments racist and damaging. Much more ahead. Now this. Our CBS News Eye on America series keeps us rooted in a value we hold dear, and that's telling your stories at the neighborhood level. And in this case, neighborhoods in American border towns. In fact, a new CBS News poll shows 58% of likely voters consider the U.S.-Mexico border a major factor in their choice for the presidency. Now, while there are no shortage of opinions on the immigration debate, we wanted to see what those closest to the issue think. CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca hits the road for a 1,000-mile-plus reality check.
The southern border, as described on the campaign trail.
It's an invasion of our country.
I saw the violence and chaos.
Or seen on the news.
In just the past 24 hours, more than 10,000 migrants have been processed.
Can easily create a picture of all border towns as lawless and chaotic. But the reality is more nuanced, as we learned during our 1,600-mile trip from McAllen, Texas to the California coast. In Laredo, Texas, ranked as one of the safest cities in the state, Mayor Victor Trevino told us his city is not the Wild West he often sees depicted.
All the cartels, there's crime and this and that, which is not true.
He points to a different surge, $320 billion worth of GM and Tesla car parts, microchips, and produce that cross America's busiest port of entry by train and truck. About 500 miles west, in Presidio, Texas, restaurant owner Hector Armendariz sees people leaving for better-paying jobs, including his own family.
This is my teenager daughter. She's graduating this May. We have 3. They've left, and they don't come back. All our kids leave and they don't come back.
Mayor John Ferguson says the local economy relies on hundreds of Mexican citizens who legally cross every day to work in restaurants or oil fields.
What would happen if it was harder for Mexican residents to come over to work in Presidio?
I think we'd be in serious trouble, like, you know, the pandemic where you didn't have enough workers and things would slow down and certain sectors might kind of dry up.
Columbus, New Mexico Mayor Phil Skinner says without border trade, towns shrink, with consequences you may not think about.
How many dentists are in town here?
In Columbus?
Yeah.
None.
How many dentists are in Puerto Palomas?
10.
So if you need dental work, you're going to Mexico.
Yes.
Arizona borders Mexico for more than 350 miles, and it is a drug smuggling hotspot. In fiscal year 2024, 66% of the fentanyl seized on the U.S.-Mexico border happened in the Tucson sector, which includes all the ports of entry in Arizona, including the one behind me. Douglas, Arizona Mayor Donald Hewish liked the bipartisan border bill that's been front and center in the campaign. The one that died after Donald Trump's criticism.
I will bring it back up and proudly sign it into law.
It would help us because we would have had more Border Patrol agents. I can understand why people didn't like the entire bill, but why stop talking about it?
Did that frustrate you?
It frustrated the heck out of us.
Frustration is everywhere along the border. Just ask Sheriff Mark Daniels in Arizona's Cochise County, who struggles with the influx of drug mules and human smugglers.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about what's going to happen here in the future?
It's more of an unknown because politics in the country is so divided right now.
Which is why the one thing you won't find on the border is hope for a solution. For Eye on America, I'm Omar Villafranca along the U.S.-Mexico border.
All right, so let's talk about the guy here with the very big mustache. A federal judge will decide the fate of former Bob's Burgers voice actor Jay Johnson, who pled guilty to a federal charge for being part of the mob during the January 6th Capitol riot. So the Department of Justice asking a judge for up to 18 months in prison for Johnson. His defense argues the government is just being too aggressive. They request leniency, claiming the film and television industry has already blacklisted him. Our monitors now take us to the state of California, where that state's governor announced a new proposal to increase the state's film tax incentive program, almost doubling it, $330 million, all the way up to $750 million. This comes as that industry loses workers to states like Nevada, offering tax incentive programs. Warner Brothers pledging to build an $8.5 billion studio in the Silver State. Governor Gavin Newsom says the program expansion will hopefully keep workers and studios in California.
We literally were losing those productions. They were leaving. They would not have left had they had processed all the criteria and were eligible. So by doubling this, by definition, you're going to see the benefit.
So at passed, the increase would go into effect for filmmakers to try to incentivize them to stay in the Golden State. July 1, 2025. An update to McDonald's E. coli outbreak. Quarter Pounders back on the menu today after testing ruled out the beef patties as a source of the outbreak. So far, we can tell you one person died, 75 others reported sick over many states. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration pointed to slivered onions as the likely culprit. All right, so look at this. Video to our monitors tells the story of a teenage surfer tackling big waves despite the fact that he actually cannot see them. Meet Ben Newman. He's a 19-year-old surfer who happens to be blind. Fresh off of a win in Germany, he's now training for gold at the World Para Surfing Championships in California. Look at that, how he feels the water with his hands. Newman calls surfing a kind of therapy, says it gives him confidence in everyday life. To navigate these waves, he says his father tells him when and where to go, and he does it through a headset.
You can tell a lot from the sound of a wave, he says, and I often put my hand in the water to feel if I'm going faster or slowing down.
Closes his eyes and feels. Ben hopes surfing will be part of the 2028 Paralympics in Los Angeles. Then maybe he can add a Paralympic medal to his collection, too. What a great young man, and what a great dad right there in his ear. That's it for us at CBS News 24/7. Thank you so much for watching us. We'll continue bringing you the headlines. When we see them, you see them.